All righty, greetings class. Welcome to week 3 already. How that happens, it's always seems like week 1 and 2 just slam right into each other, I think, and then we're already at that halfway mark. So excellent. I have seen some great work coming in from week 2 with the broth of life, kale salad, sauteed kale, loaded baked potato, and spiced lentils. Seeing some really good solid work coming through there. Does anybody have any questions regarding week 2 that I could follow up and answer right now before we hop into week 3? Everybody's feeling good. I will be grading tonight and tomorrow, getting caught up with that. But overall, like I said, I've seen some great application of getting creative with those plate ups as well, thinking about, okay, maybe I'm going to add some rice to those spiced lentils to make a complete protein, and different textures added, loading up that sweet baked potato, giving it some more depth and heftiness than just a simple roasted sweet potato. So keep up the great work. All right. This week is pretty fun, if you ask me. It's all about raw diets, right? This class is all about different approaches to wellness, right? We're talking about different health trends, whole food based, right? Whole food plant-based. This one is all about raw. So I'm assuming that most of you have all heard of, a raw food diet through your times and inquiries of reading into different diets and looking into health trends. Essentially, a raw food diet is essentially what it sounds like, right? It is raw food. We're not eating cooked products, okay? Nothing can be heated technically up to over 118 degrees Fahrenheit to still be considered raw. Now, when you think about it, 118 degrees though is definitely adding some heat. It's not like there's no heat applied. So, there's some wiggle room with that. There's some purists who will say, no, you shouldn't even have any heat applied to it. But again, that's kind of, up to the particular person. But the main base of a raw food diet is, of course, fruits and vegetables. Now, oftentimes, people that lead there's a vegan raw food, just like we know you could be vegan or vegetarian. And then there are others that might follow a raw food diet that still include raw products, raw animal products, which could be raw milks, raw cheeses, which have a lot of benefits to them. Raw honey as well, as opposed to being a process where heat treatment is going into that honey to extract, to get different products. There's raw honey, raw meat, such as beef tartare, raw fish like sashimi or sushi that utilizes raw fish. These can also be inclusive of a raw diet. Now, what would be some things that might not, like when we think about foods that we eat, what would we not be eating raw? What's a product that we wouldn't necessarily eat raw?
You mean like an animal product or?
No, any type of product.
Maybe tempeh, doesn't that have to be fermented or tofu? Or, I don't know.
Well, fermentation is a different thing. We'll talk a little bit about it, but yep, I always make guesses.
I would just go with raw meat. I mean, I don't know if I'm answering the question, but
well, raw meat is consumed for steak tartare. Obviously, we're not going to be eating raw chicken, but raw steak is. So grains and legumes, right? We have to cook those. Yeah, we've got to cook that rice to get that to a nice state, right? Same with, lentils, legumes. Those need to be cooked. And they're definitely going over 118 degrees, right? We're boiling, we're simmering. Those have heat applied. What do we know from so far being in culinary school? What does heat do to any product, whether it's a fruit, a vegetable, carbohydrate, protein? What does heat do? What are some of the things that heat can do to a product?
It reduces the nutrient content, the density.
For majority, yes, there are a
Mhm.
few that heat is needed to get it, but yes, for the great majority, heat does reduce some of the nutritional nutrients available. Awesome.
It kills bacteria.
Kills bacteria, yes. Heat
Changes,
does.
it makes it softer, more easy to eat or digest.
Boom, yes, texture and digestion. All right, so we're just looking at what heat does, right? It changes texture. It can change the nutrient content, flavor profile, right? Digestibility, and killing bacteria, right? So some good and some not so good, right? One of the main things why a lot of raw, excuse me, diet advocates, what they promote is the fact that by eating a vegetable or fruit in its raw state, I am going to get the maximum amount of nutrition. I'm going to get the maximum amount of vitamins. Things are more bioavailable and my body is going to absorb that, right? So I want to get the most out of my vegetable or my fruit as possible. And by doing that, I need to eat this raw because heat is going to destroy some of that, right? I believe it was Jeanette who brought up something really important to think about. What could be a huge downside to always eating raw?
The risk for bacterial infection.
You got it, Monique. Yes, exactly, right? We know that putting heat kills a lot of bacteria. If we're not really taking good care of properly cleaning, washing, making sure our hands are nice and clean, making sure our workstation is nice and clean, there's literally no heat applied. So how are we going to potentially kill any harmful bacteria? Now, one thing to think about, okay, if we're looking at it just from a plant-based source and we're not looking at, meat or animal proteins or eggs or that, let's take that as one component and look at that as a separate thing. But eliminating those options, right, where we know there's a huge risk for cross-contamination, bacteria, and sickness. Even so, right, dirt, right? When we look at, if you look at, for example, this is kind of a weird thing, but think about food outbreaks, outbreaks that we've heard of where onions are getting recalled, scallions have been recalled, arugula, romaine lettuce. What is that usually associated with? Does anybody know what oftentimes those recalls are associated with?
E. coli and salmonella.
E. coli, right? Salmonella. And how often, do we think that those products were served raw or they were cooked when when the cases came? Because I'll let you know, a lot of these were toppings. So toppings will be served raw, right? So when we start looking at that, we realize, okay, well, vegetables come from the dirt, right? From the earth, there's dirt. There's a chance for some E. coli on there, right? So when we look at a raw health food, a raw food diet, we need to be extremely aware of sanitary conditions, okay? Keeping a very clean kitchen, okay? That's the number one thing for safety reasons when you're eating a raw diet, okay? So now we're gonna start looking at, so say we take this, I wanna get the maximum nutrient out of my vegetables, okay? Well, how is that, Monique was talking about this digestibility. How does everybody feel compared, if you eat, depending upon, if let's say you eat a raw salad of coleslaw, right? Not coleslaw, but a bunch of cabbage, right? And you eat just a huge bowl of it, loaded up with some vinegar and oil, maybe some spices. It's delicious. And a few hours later, you're starting to feel it in your stomach, right? Versus maybe a cooked cabbage, right? You're going to feel a little bit different. So something also to consider is, most times when people go into a raw vegan diet or a raw diet, they warm themselves up to it because it can be hard a bit. It takes a lot of work also for your body to break down these raw vegetables. We know that when we cook a vegetable, it starts, we've talked about this, it starts to change the texture. It starts to break down a bit. The more it's cooked, the easier it is to digest, right? It's just a bit easier on our body. That's why we think about when you look at, you know, baby foods, right? Those things have been cooked and pureed. Oftentimes next week, we're gonna be making khichdi, which is part of the Ayurvedic diet. But this khichdi, which is a lentil and rice and vegetable and spice-based dish, is oftentimes quite thoroughly cooked. And they're not kept, vegetables are not kept, you know, they're not cooked so that they remain bright and vibrant. They're cooked so that the digestion is very easy. And this khichdi is often given to people that are old or ill because the body needs to be fighting for everything else, and it doesn't need to focus all that attention on digestion. So that is something to be thinking about when we're looking at raw diets. It is not always the easiest to digest if you switch directly into this. It can just be a lot. It can be taxing on your body. You can have a lot of gas issues as well. What would be one way that we could potentially still have a raw product and some other beneficial bacteria and make it change texture and make it easier to digest? Any ideas?
Fermentation?
Fermentation. Yes, exactly. What's your question, Monique?
So I'm sorry. I just wanted to know, because I didn't see it in the reading. I might have missed it. How did they figure out that 118 is the highest degree for heat? Do we know how they came upon that?
You know, I think it was, I don't know. You know what, I'll find out, because I don't like saying, you know, if I don't know something, I don't like giving an answer. But I think that it was based off like a ton of tests and checking nutritional content based on, okay, once we cross that 118, okay, degradation, you know, we start losing vitamin C at this point, and it's just like starts just falling rapidly. And I think that's what it is. So literally testing at different, I believe, to me, that makes the most sense of how it would be approached, that they're testing it at different temperatures and times of how long it's been exposed to those temperatures. And seeing the nutritional content of it, I think. But I will double check, because that's a great question. But I think that's excuse me, what makes sense. Because this comes into a huge thing. So I'm actually going to pull up one of the things that's probably the coolest part of, I think, of the reading this week. There's a lot of great information, but to me, this is one of the coolest. All right, way back up here. There's obviously a lot to talk about this week. I'm not going to talk about everything because we will save some for the study hall, because I don't want to keep you all late. So we're getting into you know, some of these the basics of raw foods and a raw food diet. Vitamin retention, right? So this talks about all of the sailors that were dying at sea because they didn't have what it turns out, they didn't have vitamin C, which was preventing scurvy, rickets, et cetera, right? But now this is what's interesting. So vitamin C starts to drop out really quickly. It can oxidize, and as soon as temperature, sorry for the dogs, is applied, it starts to lose vitamin C, okay? So this is where we go into this really cool section. So okay, this is talking about broccoli. Ensuring that food has never been roasted, broiled, boiled, grilled, baked, microwaved, or heated beyond 118 is essential to the raw food diet. So when we look into the percentages, here we go. For example, folate, also known as vitamin B9, found in broccoli, asparagus, and spinach. Studies have found that boiling broccoli causes it to lose up to 75% of its natural folate. If the leftovers were heated the following day, 30% of the remaining folate is also lost. All right. Sorry, there's the dog. 1 second. So this alone can shed some insight as to how much heat can play on a vitamin, right? If we're thinking about, if we look, okay, this is what's also interesting, right? If we look at that nutrition data website that we took a look at, I think it's on here as well. Yeah. last week. So if you put in your raw quantity of broccoli versus, let's do broccoli. Maybe I should just sign up. I think it's a sign, right? Let me pull this up later, but what I'm saying, what I'll show you is that you will see that you're going to see the content of the nutrients change. Let me pull this up afterwards. I want to just keep talking for a second before we get into this. But this is another great thing. So obviously, if we're looking at a diet, say you're trying to really not just think about, okay, I'm trying to get healthy, but I need to make sure that I'm getting my vitamins in every day. And if I look at if I say I just look and see, oh, okay, broccoli has X percentage of B9, but then I'm cooking it or roasting it or sauteing it, I'm not actually getting all of that. Not to mention what happens once we get into the body and how much is actually absorbed. But this is something that's super important when we're thinking about how many nutrients, what percentage of vitamins we're actually absorbing and getting. Now, there are other factors that come into play, such as like your own gut biome and how well it's digesting, how much you can absorb. Other factors can inhibit or block the amount of vitamins that you're absorbing. If your body's not working at high capacity, you might just not absorb as much anyhow. Excuse me. But this is so important because when we start looking at a diet and say, oh, well, I'm eating X, Y, and Z, but if you're eating it all fried or roasted or cooked, you're getting, not necessarily absorbing, but the product itself does not have as much of the vitamins. So this is a lot where that idea and movement came from. Well, if we're losing all of these nutrients, why don't I just stop eating cooked food and eat this raw and get more of those nutrients into my system? And that's why it is so important to have a diverse diet, not only, in my opinion, not only consisting of raw foods, but also cooked foods. If you think about, let's just think about, this is one issue that I had. I went raw for a little while, and I stopped when I went to France because I was like, well, I'm going to eat bread and cheese and other deliciousness. But I did it for about 4 months, and it was a great experience. I would do it again. You do have to get creative with what you're eating, though. And thinking about, am I getting enough protein? Am I getting enough vitamins and nutrients? Am I getting that? Even though that sounds crazy because you're eating these whole natural products, but if it's a raw vegan diet, you might be lacking in some arenas. But again, thinking about digesting raw food, right? The body is really working hard for that, right? In the summer, raw foods, salads are far more common. This is something we kind of touched on last course, right? Summer, your body is craving things high in water, crunchy, fresh, refreshing, delicious. And the body doesn't really have a problem with breaking that down, right? Because it's already hot and it's like, let's just keep on revving up. But what happens if you live in a cold area and you are constantly eating cold food? How do you think you might feel? Do you think that would feel good for you or not? Again, this is just a personal question that I'm getting you to think about. How could a raw food diet versus a cooked food make you feel? What do you think if in the winter, cold months, and you're just living on raw foods? Sorry.
I think
I don't know.
One
For
second.
me, oh,
Sorry about that dog emergency. I put her away. Tell me.
okay, what's me?
Let's hear Maria.
Okay, like if I think about it, like if it's winter, you think about hot chocolate, you know? But in my case, I don't drink any hot product. I just drink like cold, like cold coffee or everything with ice. So for me, it's a little bit weird, but I feel like if you are in winter, you think about like just hot, like hot chocolate or just something warm. So
Warm foods, right? To make you actually feel good, right?
Mhm.
So that's one of the biggest things in traditional Chinese medicine, which I was talking to a practitioner of Chinese medicine specifically regarding a raw food diet. And she said, you know what? I think a raw food diet can be great during the colder, the warmer months. But when you look at it from a TCM perspective, eating raw cold foods throughout the year in cold weather, it's again, TCM is a very different approach to health and wellness, but that it's just not the best for the body. And I was thinking, I thought when I was a raw vegan, it was just during the summer. I don't know how I would feel during the winter if I was just constantly, it's freezing in Chicago and I'm just constantly eating cold food. I just don't know if I would feel like I ever got warm. So it's, again, something to think about. There are also some people who are fruitarians who literally just eat raw fruit. There are all different types of diets out there, right? So it's something to think about, and again, I think doing some fasts of raw diets could be a fantastic way of cleaning out that system, getting it in. And if you have the luck of having a raw restaurant in your city or town, I highly suggest checking it out. I was so excited. This was while I was in culinary school. And I think it's called Cafe. Yeah, it's called Cafe Gratitude, I believe. I'm going to show this to you guys because this is so cool. And this was back in, way back. Okay, shoot, it's not Cafe Gratitude.
Chef,
Yeah.
you know that one of the things why I'm studying this and I'm doing
So
this.
wait, Maria, how long have you are only eating raw foods, or what's up?
Yeah, like, okay, the first time that I tried raw food, it was back when I was in Miami. I went to a restaurant, the name is Plant.
Mm-hmm.
And I received a cooking class and my chef just explained everything to us. And I was like super surprised. Like I never thought about that,
Totally. And then, so you started it up again?
Like I did it for a week, but I'm not like a fan of fruits. So I was eating just vegetables and nuts. And it was kind of hard, but it's cool, it's nice to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to mix up the diet, get some extra nutrients. I will say, everybody was always like, wow, you're glowing when you eat this raw vegan life. You're getting so many extra veggies. So it's a different approach. So it looks like it used to be called, and I don't know, I'm just pulled this up because I wanted to show you all, but this was back in 2005 when Cafe Gratitude in Berkeley was open. It looks like the one in Berkeley is now permanently closed, which is too bad, but it looks like they have a bunch of other Cafe Gratitudes. However, I don't think that it is only raw anymore, but it might be. So let's just see some of these. There's so many. So I'll do some more research here. Let's just see what's in San Diego Beach. Let's check the all-day menu. But I don't think that they are any longer. Yeah, they're probably not just raw. They're not just raw anymore. I think they are just vegan and vegetarian. But tons of really cool, phenomenal food. It's incredible what you can do with raw foods, right? It sounds like, okay, maybe it's a little bit boring, but when you start diving into it and thinking about the flavor profiles that you can get. Now, I will say, oftentimes people that follow a raw diet, they're also not going to eat nutritional yeast. So all of you lovers out there for the, who are vegans and are like, yeah, throw on the nutritional yeast for some of that umami pow, pow pow, it's not going to be, if you're leading that true raw food, it would not be considered a raw food. Jeanette, yeah.
Yeah, there's a natural doctor that's in Houston, and when people are going to him to try to transition over, but the first thing he does is put them on a raw diet for 14 days and have them detox. And and he's also put a cafe in his office where he cooks food also for the people. And they're always, when they come back here to Beaumont, they're bringing me their list of foods that are you doing raw? Because we need this to do. And so I'm like, okay, I'll incorporate that also when I open up the commercial kitchen. But people are looking for raw right now.
Definitely. I mean, this has been trending. Like I said, I started doing a raw vegan diet when it was 2008. So this is, some things take a long time to get there, right? But another wonderful thing that we can look at when we're talking about raw, we were mentioning, we talked about, well, what can't you eat? Well, it's going to be hard to eat grains. Well, a lot of grains and legumes can be sprouted. Specifically, let me just pull up the class page now. I'm just going to pull this up so we can get there. So you can check this out. But by sprouting, sprouting allows you to eat this grain, which opens up the door to a wider array of nutrients, as well as a bit more diversity. So we talked a little bit about this last week, so I'm not going to go into it. We know that they're nutrient enriched and then nutrient fortified. Nutrient fortified means enriched means we've taken the same the vitamins that were there and added them back in. Fortified means we're at, like, who's ever seen orange juice fortified with calcium? Calcium is not present in oranges, so that is a fortified product, okay? Fortified with calcium and vitamin D is often what it is. So as we compound into, we talked a little bit about these animal byproducts, what could be acceptable. We've got those eggs, depending upon raw milks, raw yogurts, raw fish, raw steak, really depends. We talked about sanitary and hygiene products as well, and how important that is. But sprouting is where it gets really cool, because while you would normally not be able to eat just a raw lentil that was soaked, okay, or a raw grain, but when you sprout it, now immediately that is edible. All right. And when we think about a sprout, okay, when you think about a dormant seed or grain, it's just sitting there, right? And now you put it in a little bit of water, you put it in the dark spot, and it is using all of its energy to spring out just a little sprout, okay? So these little sprouts are just jam-packed with energy and nutrition, because it is taking everything that it's got in that little grain, that capsule, to make new life. So you can imagine the amount of just energy that's getting circulated. So these things are just loaded with, they are powerhouses. That's why sprouts have always been a big thing. Sprouts. But I will say sprouts are another huge potential contaminant for getting sick. If you don't have the correct water, if you've let them over sprout, if you're not straining them and rinsing them daily with good water, good quality water, huge risk for becoming very sick, right? If you see, oftentimes back in the day, not during the 90s, it was always like, never get sprouts at the salad bar, don't get them on your sandwiches, because they were just a huge risk for contamination, right? Just because they're sitting there, they're growing, and they're in that high moisture content area, living environment, and just a big potential risk. But what is great is that it increases GABA. All right, GABA is also what is it's a part of you've got a receptor inside your body. But GABA is also this talks about induces brain tranquility, phenols and function that function to reduce inflammation, blah 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 blah. Right? You can keep on reading this. Also, red wine has when you have a sip of that, also GABA is released. So some of these, it helps you relax a little bit. But again, this is just another nutrient, right? The body is constantly working. The body is this incredible, fascinating machine that is working to get as, suck up and get as much nutrition and vitamins as possible, right? So when you're thinking about different approaches to a raw vegan lifestyle, sprouts would be great, okay? And really actually quite beneficial to somebody that is especially doing a raw vegan diet. These other additionally anti-nutrient factors such as phytates and tannins decrease. All right. The phytates become phytic acids when bound to minerals like calcium, magnesium, iron, and zinc. Phytic acids are also there when we're soaking our nuts. This is also to help with those to the phytic acids. Okay. So there's a reason why when we do a lot of our nuts and soaking, is to actually make it a bit more digestible. Some of those enzymes, if you've ever eaten a lot of nuts at one sitting, you might notice that your stomach hurts a bit, right? And that's because they're usually toasted or even raw. But once you've soaked those, it changes some of those enzymes and it makes it a lot easier to digest. So when we start thinking about this, right? Here's some awesome, if you want to start sprouting, if you haven't yet, you 100% can. This is some tips and tricks on how to do it. You can also do it there's sprouting jars that you can buy, which are super easy sprouting jars with a screen. You can make them at two, mason jar, fairly large size jar. You put your, whether it's your grains or your nuts or whatever, your seeds in there. You soak them for, depending upon, anywhere between 8 and 12 hours. You strain that water off. And then every day you're doing a rinse, okay? A full rinse with fresh water and emptying that out. And again, emptying it out. And you grow those to the sprouts hit the right size. And that's, some of that is going to be a little bit of personal preference. What sprout do you see a lot in Asian cuisine? These are probably, for me, I had the most success with making bean sprouts, and those come from the mung bean. So buy yourself a bunch of mung beans, start the soaking process, and then starting the sprout process. You'll notice though, as that, let me see if I can get a visual. Bean sprouts. As if you've ever been at gone shopping for mung bean sprouts, you'll see that there are a lot of different stages of this, and you have to find the right flavor and texture that you want, because the larger they get, the less sweet they become, and they become a bit more bitter. So I wanted to show you this, but this is, like I said, if you want to start off with something easy, these were the first beans that I started sprouting. And I had some awesome success with it. So this is what they start to look like. They are kind of cute, I think. You see that this green outer case is that mung bean shell that you'll see when you have the mung bean themselves. And they start off this little curve. And then with time, you're eventually they're gonna keep growing. And you'll see that then you start to see a bit more sprouting out. We've got now leaves shooting from them, but this is often the point where those are harvested and used for mung bean sprouts. They usually say anywhere between 1 and 2 inches. After that, they start to just take on quite a bit of a different flavor. But as you can see, you get a whole bundle of them. And again, they're just loaded with crunch. And you can sprout everything. Nowadays, you'll see a lot of people doing broccoli sprouts. You look at fine dining restaurants and you see tons of sprouts on plate ups or microgreens, which is essentially, a microgreen is just a sprout that has continued to grow a little bit. And it's just this baby little plant, right? But they have the essence and the smell and the notes of it. So if you get broccoli sprouts or broccoli microgreens or pea shoots, you're going to have these smells and slight flavor profile. So there will be variation within the flavor profile. You can also sprout your nuts. I'm sure maybe you've seen some raw bars that are kind of like crackers. Oftentimes this is a combination of sprouted grains, sprouted nuts that's then been ground down and then formed into a flat, a really, spread out on a non-stick surface, very thin, and then dehydrated at that 118 degrees or below for X number of hours, and you yield a crispy, crunchy finished product, which is awesome. Kale chips, also part of that whole raw vegan movement. Fruit leathers are another great way. You can puree that. You take a fruit, puree it, and then take a nice thin spread of that, and then dehydrate it, and you've got pliable fruit leather. You can also alternatively, right, you could do this with your beef jerky, and technically you take that raw meat, you'd add a marinade, put that on, and then dehydrate and get that finished jerky texture as well. So there are lots of different approaches, and you can get a lot of different textures once you start looking at, hey, you know what? It's not just the raw. I'm not just eating, you know, a broccoli floret. Well, what happens when I grate the broccoli stems and I actually blend? I'm going to blend the top florets, right, and get that into a nice smooth pesto. Wow, I have just completely transformed this. Now, what else do we think might be really beneficial to a raw diet? If we're looking at, let's just compare these two things, right? Me taking a broccoli floret and just chomping away versus I've taken the florets, the tops, those little buds. I've blended that into a pesto or a paste, some type of sauce, and I've grated those stalks. Which version is going to be easier for me to digest, do you all think? Chopping into that whole broccoli floret, or eating a salad that's been composed of these grated broccoli stalks and a broccoli sauce? Which one do you think?
The grated one, the one you broke down, the grated one.
Yes, exactly. Why, Monique?
Well, because you've made it smaller, so it's easier to digest, and you're not having to, you know, raw like the stems of broccoli is pretty tough and fibrous. So the smaller bits are easier to work with.
Exactly. So what is super important with that raw diet? Knife cuts, right? Getting some nice and small pieces that it's easy to digest, because otherwise, like Monique said, it's, you know, even just thinking about eating a raw broccoli floret, there's a lot of work you have to do. When we, I believe in your next class, I'm not sure when, but you'll start with nutrition. And what you'll learn is that digestion starts in your mouth. Okay. Salivary amylase is released. So the more you chew, this is why, you know, when we're kids, it's always so important. You got to chew your food. You got to chew your food. Because if you're just taking down huge hunks, it's really hard for your body to process that, right? So first mastication, right? Chewing, breaking this down, getting into smaller pieces. Then the salivary amylase, which is just some, you know, enzymatic stuff coming in that's also going to start helping break down. So those smaller pieces are just a lot easier to work with, okay? So I just looked at the time at 7:12. We can cover, like I said, there's so much to cover this week. I want to hop into recipes, but I hope that you're at least starting to think about, ooh, what can I make that's raw? What is raw? What isn't raw? How can I, now I need to start looking at labels and checking out this for raw that or raw that, you know, what makes it raw, and checking out, you know, are there processed foods that are raw? Where can I buy them? Convenient foods, take a look around, see if there's any, you know, raw restaurants nearby that have some dishes you want to try out. Raw desserts. You can do so much. You can, just like we're using cashews to make nut alternatives, cheese alternatives. I remember tasting a cashew cheesecake that was just out of this world. You know, using dates is another great way to incorporate getting some of that sticky feeling for desserts as well. So start thinking about ways you can you know, just hopefully these recipes this week are going to open your eyes and say, ooh, because we're making sushi this week. Guess what sushi needs? Rice. Well, not in this case. So let's hop in and take a look at what we're going to make. We're going to use parsnip. You could also use cauliflower, obviously, which is the super popular rice these days, right? But tons of options. So we're hopping into week 3, raw world. So let's take a look. First one, actually, I'm not gonna go over kimchi first. I wanna start off with a few of these easier ones, and then we'll go into the more intense ones. So watermelon tuna, which is gonna become a component of your sushi. This is extremely easy to assemble and come together. You're gonna get yourself a watermelon, and you're gonna small dice that, right? Again, small dice, looking at size, right? remember marinating, which we didn't get into too much, but marinating is a huge factor here. Just like we know that when you marinate a meat, it becomes tender. Marinating vegetables, right? We know that if a vegetable has been sitting in a marinade with acid or oil or spices, it starts to get softer, right? We know acid is going to make things texture change as well. So something to think about. So you do want to make sure that you get a good size here. So small dice. And then you're just going to basically take those ingredients, cover and allow to marinate for at least 2 hours. And then enjoy and use as desired, which you're obviously going to turn into some of the sushi, but you could also do a raw poke bowl if you wanted as well. So we have a few crossover ingredients as well, like the Korean red chili flakes will be used in this as well as in your kimchi. So taking that coconut amino acids, and again, remember soy sauce is not raw. So that's why this is these recipes have specific ingredients, because this is really focusing on what a raw diet would consist of. And you have, and to think about how many things are actually processed that you take for granted that you might eat and that are not raw. Okay. Soy sauce, for example. So coconut aminos are oftentimes raw. And then we want to go into either getting rice vinegar or another raw alternative, such as raw coconut vinegar, ume, or plum vinegar. Okay. Same when it comes into sesame oil, cold pressed. If we've ever seen a label for olive oil that's cold pressed, that's because the second extractions of oil, hot water is applied to this to extract more oil from the seeds or the nuts or the fruits themselves. Okay. So it does not technically fall into the raw category. But again, it really depends on how hardcore you are, right? So, if you're going hardcore direct, I'm raw purist, you're going to eliminate a large number of things that you can eat. But if you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to be predominant, maybe most people, I think a lot of people end up being about 85 to 90, 95% raw, and that's kind of their goal, because they know that they want soy sauce or some other ingredients or different oils that might be they cannot find cold pressed. So it's something to think about. So in this situation, you're basically just going to cover that, let it chill, and you're going to be ready to go. Okay, so simple and straightforward. Me personally, since I'm not raw, I probably would use a toasted sesame oil in here and soy sauce, just because I want those flavors, But if I'm making if I were to be hired for a raw dinner, I can't use those ingredients, not because I like it, right? Because it does not adhere to the raw guidelines. So just like when we think about the importance of gluten-free or nut-free or vegan or vegetarian, so goes true for raws, right? Hardcore raw food diet-based people, they don't want to eat those other ingredients. So something to consider, right? It might seem extreme, but then when you put it in context of yourself, you realize, oh yeah, I understand. All right, next we're hopping into our raw tuna sushi. We're going to take that watermelon tuna that you have, that's going to be part of it. And what you're going to do to make your rice, you're going to take a parsnip, you're going to peel and grate that. Hemp seeds, of course, raw, coconut aminos, sesame oil, cold pressed, raw sesame seeds, not toasted. And you're going to process that in a food processor, okay? Pulse though, again, remember pulsing is key. If you hit that on button, it's going to run and you're going to end up with mulch. You don't want that. You want something that resembles rice. You want individual grains. You want something that has not been completely broken down. You want some little bits in there. Okay. Next, you're going to take and make a quick dipping sauce. You're going to take another part of those amino acids, as well as vinegar and ginger. Let that sit aside, right? That's going to be good for, hours. And it's just going to let the more time that sits, the ginger is just going to become a little bit more pronounced, which is really beautiful. Then you're going to take your bamboo mat or a tea towel. If you don't have a bamboo mat, you just need something flexible. Wrap that all in plastic wrap. Do one wrap here, one wrap here. Make sure that everything's covered, because as soon as food gets in, it's contaminated. And next, you're going to take that nori sheet, which we talked about the other day in class, which is that long flat one. Oftentimes those are toasted. So if you want to get a raw one, they can be toasted either before or after when you're purchasing. So you just want to make sure that you do have a good quality nori sheet that's untoasted and cut in half for this one, depending upon the size though. You just want to make sure that if it's really big, you might want to go with the full size there. And you're going to slice it down on your bamboo or tea towel wrapped in plastic. And then you're going to just take a little bit of that parsnip rice, okay? Make a thin layer that goes from edge to edge. And then what you're going to do, you need part of that nori still not covered with rice, because you're going to bind to it. It's sticky. So once you apply either a little bit of the ginger sauce or any bit of the water, it will seal. Okay. So you're going to fill that. It's going to take some time. So don't get frustrated as well. You might get frustrated. Making sushi rolls are not easy. That's why sushi masters practice for years and years and years and years before they can even roll a sushi roll. It's to get the right thickness. I myself have struggled. One time it's too thick, then it's too thin. But with time and practice, you'll get the hang, just like those gnocchis. It's new. It's a new technique and you have to get that feeling, but with time it'll come. Next, you're going to add your extra fillings. So some of that watermelon tuna, some julienne cucumber, super thinly sliced avocado. I would even do a super thin. I might even add a really julienne of carrot as well if I wanted a little extra crunch for some extra texture there. And then line that up nice and pretty. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to roll that. You're going to make sure that you're pushing gently, but rolling that. And as you roll, that bamboo mat or the towel will start to pull away, and you'll keep going, and then you'll tuck it in. And then this is where to make it stick and the one side, you're either going to want, this doesn't mention it here, but what I often do to make sure that it sticks, I either might take a separate, obviously hands are clean. I might have a separate bowl of a dipping sauce or soy sauce or just water. And I put my finger in there and I do a little, especially if your nori sheets just aren't, if they're a little bit dry and brittle, and just put a little bit on there, that'll help seal it. And then let it sit, okay? Roll everything up before you start slicing. It gives it a little bit more time to kind of find its place. Sometimes if you roll immediately and cut immediately, it helps just to have a little bit more time sitting in its roll. And then serve and enjoy. All right. Super easy once you get the roll down. But does anybody have any questions regarding that? I don't see any questions in the chat.
Chef, I have a question.
Yeah.
I was not able to find the hemp seeds.
Okay, that's okay. You can just eliminate them.
Okay. I was like, I didn't know what to use. So
Yeah,
okay,
you can just
perfect.
eliminate. You could also alternatively just add, I personally would add some more sesame seeds, which would be
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
Perfect. And I have one more question. I was not able to find the cabbage that you
Yeah,
said.
I will cover that once we get there. Sound good?
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. So yeah, a sesame seed is another, if you can't find hemp seeds, is a good one. Next, we hop into your kale chips. All right. This is where if you have a dehydrator, awesome. If you don't, you're going to use your oven on your lowest setting, which is about 180. Okay. You're going to take your kale leaves after you've cleaned them, stems removed, just like we did last week, and then tear them into about 2 to 3 inches in size. Place in that large bowl, toast with some olive oil and salt. Make sure that those are nicely coated. And then you're going to put those on your dehydrator tray and let that go, okay, for about 8 hours. Alternatively, until you get them nice and crispy. Alternatively, you're going to set that oven nice and low. You're going to still do the same procedure. You're going to put it on a sheet tray, okay? And I would put a no-slip, a non-slip mat if you have one, or parchment paper. It just helps a little bit. And make sure that they're not overlapping, because they just stick together, and that double layer is going to take longer for it to dehydrate fully, right? So you want the most exposed surface area. And then once that is nice and crispy, you're good to go. Again, that would not be considered raw because we're going up to 180. Remove, use, and store in an airtight container for whatever is left. And those will last, 2 to 4 days, depending. So again, simple, really simple, straightforward, and easy recipe here. These last 3 are. Now we'll go into a little bit more intense. Starting off with that fermented nut cheese, and then I will hop into kimchi. So here we go. We've got nuts, raw cashews, and about 3/4 of a cup. If you want to just use all cashews, totally okay with me. If you add another nut, you're going to have more depth and flavor. Okay, that's the benefit of having multiple nuts, different types of nuts. You're just going to get a different flavor. So drain and soak, right? Rinse, and now you're going to put that into your food powder, your blender or food processor, along with adding your apple cider vinegar, raw and unfiltered. This is the best. Bragg's makes one, Trader Joe's sells one. Most like grocery stores have an organic brand. They often have a raw apple cider vinegar as well. It'll go a long way and it has tons of benefits for it. You're going to want to blend that until it's fairly smooth and creamy, just like you've been doing all these other nut alternative cheeses. Okay. Now, add your nutritional yeast if you're using it. Onion powder. That's another thing. Onion powder and garlic powder. Some spices have been dehydrated, right? It depends. There's a whole thing on spices and the raw. I'll try to find the article because it's really interesting, but spices and the temperature that they're being treated at, oftentimes they might not be considered raw because of the temperatures that they're being processed at, to kill off other bacteria, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to combine all of that and together, make that nice and smooth. Just add it, blend it again, right? Then you're going to take a strainer, you're going to line it with cheesecloth, and you're going to pour that puree in there. Okay. Cover with cheesecloth and cover and wrap that up in plastic wrap. Okay. Let it sit at room temp. You want it in a dark place, just no direct sunlight. Okay. About 8 hours or overnight. Remember, overnight really depends upon how much you sleep. Okay. Or you could leave that in the morning. If you soaked your nuts overnight, the next morning, blend, set it out, and then it's ready to work when you get home from work or whatever, or from a day out. And you're going to then place in the refrigerator, and allow that cheese to firm up. So a lot of that extra moisture, right? Extra liquid is going to fall out of the bottom of there, after you've been sitting in that strainer and cheesecloth. Let that get nice and firm. And then once it's chilled, you're going to remove that cheesecloth and kind of help mold it a bit more. Okay. You could do smaller pieces if you'd like, depending upon how you wanted to, if you think about presentation wise, if you're doing charcuterie boards, if you're doing a larger format, just keep that large one. You could do it into logs, small cheese balls, place those back into the fridge to set. About an hour. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time, maybe 2 to 3 hours, depending. Also depends on how filled up your refrigerator is, and the temp that you're setting it, but you need it to firm up. Now, you can roll that in extra herbs or edible flowers, whatever you want to make a beautiful presentation. You don't need to. Another classic one, like crushed black pepper and parsley. It just adds, it adds a bit of pop, a bit of color, and a little bit of extra depth. But you can get some really beautiful different flavor profiles by adding your outside spices. You could actually put, as it mentioned, you could put paprika. You could, if you wanted it yellow, you could do turmeric. You could throw cumin. You could, whatever you want, spice blend wise. You could put barbecue, seasoning. If you wanted something that had some smokiness, you could do smoked paprika on there. Whatever your heart desires, have some fun with it if you want to. All right. But this is a different process. The flavor profile is going to be different because this is a fermented nut cheese. Okay. It's very different from the smooth ones that we've been having before. As you can see in the video, you're going to get a stiffer mold, a stiffer cheese. And additionally, I just saw this cool thing and I will have to save it and I'll send it all to you because it is a French woman who I believe went raw or vegan. I'm not sure. And she makes all of these aged nut cheeses. And obviously being a French woman, she's quite passionate about our cheeses. It knows those flavor profiles. So I'll see if I can see it again. It was an ad and somewhere along on social media at some point, but I thought it was pretty cool. So I'll share that with you. And last but not least, let's hop into this kimchi. All righty. So if you cannot find Napa cabbage, I do want to bring up what a Napa cabbage head looks like. This is what it looks like. Asian stores are going to be your best source for this. They're very pliable. It's not like our green cabbage, which is really dense and tough. These are very soft. It's almost lettuce-like up here. And the stems are very similar to bok choy, okay, to get an idea. Now, if you cannot find Napa cabbage, your next best option is Savoy cabbage. So again, it's not as tough and as rigid as regular cabbage. You'll find that this has the groove similar to Napa cabbage. Maria, do you have Savoy cabbage there that you can get, or do you know?
Do you have a picture?
Oh, I'm not sharing shooters.
No.
Thanks. I thought I was talking about Napa cabbage. Let me first show you what Napa cabbage looks like sometimes. So this is Napa cabbage, right? The stems are like bok choy, and these leaves are very delicate, almost like lettuce-like. Savoy cabbage is your next best option here. As you can see, it's not as dense as our traditional green cabbage. It has all of these little ridges and grooves, but can you find Savoy cabbage?
Not really.
No. Okay.
I have well at any supermarket, just the regular one, the green one.
The regular green one. I mean, you can make it with that. It's going to take a lot longer. The texture of a traditional green cabbage is so much tougher than these little leaves here of the Savoy or the Napa. These are just far more delicate. So it will take longer. The flavor profile will not be the same. The texture will be a little bit different. But you could do it. Alternatively, what you're going to want to do is you could just increase the amount of daikon radish, or get scallions, lots of scallions. Kimchi is made in a ton of different ways, but for this specific recipe, what the traditional kimchi made with Napa cabbage, you need to wash that cabbage and drain it, and then you sprinkle it with salt and you rub it in, and then you let it sit about 2 hours and it softens up. And then you're going to rinse the salt away and squeeze it to drain excess liquid, because you don't want too much water in there. So you could try it with regular cabbage, but it is just not going to be the same. But I would say just do it with it and see what the results are. That would be my, use the regular cabbage. But maybe do a half batch, because if it doesn't turn out, you don't want to,
Yeah, I'm gonna see tomorrow if I'm able to find it in another supermarket, and I will let you know.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. But yeah, Savoy or Napa is what you want to do, because you're just going to get the best texture. Once you've had that drained and strained and squeezed out, you're going to make a paste essentially with Korean chili paste, gochugaru, and garlic peeled. You're gonna combine all this in a food processor. Your ginger, a fresh knob, garlic cloves, your sugar, water, and miso. Get that until nice and smooth, and then you're just gonna rub that paste into each of those leaves. Okay, into the cabbage on the leaves. You're gonna rub it all over the daikon, the carrots, the scallions, and then you're gonna put that into a non-reactive container. Non-reactive container meaning glass or plastic. All right. You don't want anything like aluminum or anything that will react. Okay. And then you're going to pack that down. I personally would put it in a glass jar. It's the best because plastic sometimes leaches flavor. So if you have a larger glass mason jar, definitely use that with a wide mouth. Go for that. Pack that in so you don't have a lot of air holes in there. And then you want at least an inch of headspace, meaning open space where it's not filled to the brim. You're going to take some warm water and salt, get that to dissolve, and pour that over and press down and make sure everything is fully submerged. Making sure that everything is fully submerged allows for that proper fermentation. You're not going to have some that's exposed and some that's not. You need it fully submerged. You're going to cover with lid, and then you have two options. One, again, room temperature is so important here. Somewhere between 55 to 65. 60 degrees is ideal for fermentation. Sometimes, depending upon where you live, your place might not be 55 to 65. And if it's colder, it's going to take a little bit longer. If it's warmer, it's going to take less. Alternatively, you can go straight into the fridge, but it's going to take about 3 weeks to get a finished product. 3.5 weeks. Okay. And what you're going to want to see are these bubbles. The bubbles indicate fermentation, right? Whenever we see bubbles going, we know that it is fermenting, just like when you're making kimchi as well. All right. And then once it's at the strength you like, you can use it. Kimchi is great. There's so many awesome recipes with kimchi. Kimchi fried rice is probably one of my favorites. Not raw, but delicious. And I think that would be it. Does anybody have any questions regarding the kimchi or the fermented nut cheese? I'm just going to blow into this discussion question because it's super fast. Really quick, what are the difficulties a person may experience in following the raw food diet? All right. And are there ways to address these issues? Standard, you guys all rock out a great job on that discussion forum. Get your initial post, answer those questions, and then follow up with questions and comments to your classmates talking about what could be a potential, maybe you're going to think of something that's a potential issue compared to somebody else. I'll tell you this much, eating out is one of the biggest things right there. So think outside of the box of more than just eating out at a restaurant. All right. Does anybody have any questions regarding kimchi or fermented cheese?
Chef, Sophie, I did have a question. With the, oh my gosh, long notes. Where are we? Yes, the kimchi. You said, and I think you kind of addressed it, but you said room temperature. I can either put it in the cooler or let it sit. I live in an area where it's like 90 degrees inside or something, like if we don't put the AC on.
If you're not doing, if you don't have AC and your house is pretty warm, go into the fridge. If you don't have the control over your room temp, essentially, if you have a basement, some people like basements. Kimchi traditionally is made underground, dig holes, and they have these clay pots and they go in and they ferment down there because it has that perfect temperature for storage. So that's what you would want to do. If you're in a hot area, 100% put into the fridge. All right.
Okay, yeah, that's it. I think that was my biggest question, because normally, like on average, my house is 78 to 82.
Yeah, then you're probably, unless you have a colder area to store it, you're going to want to just do it in the fridge then.
Okay, all right, thank you, Chef. I think
You're
that's
welcome.
the only question that I had.
Okay, right on. Anybody else?
I have a question about the coconut cold press oil, the coconut oil that's cold pressed.
Yes.
Is there a substitute we can use for that? Can we use, like maybe the cacao?
Well, you're looking for coconut oil.
Okay.
So this is an oil that you need.
Oh, it's just the oil. Okay. Okay.
Just an oil. Again, this is what falls into the raw category. If you had some organic coconut oil that's not cold pressed, again, when we're looking at a hardcore line, right, of saying making it raw, you would need to have cold pressed.
Cold
oil.
press. Okay. Okay.
If you're not doing that, then you can have, I would use an organic coconut oil and you'll
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. All righty. All right, class. Fun class. I hope you all enjoyed. And I hope to see some of you on Friday at the study hall. We'll continue to talk a little bit more about marination and what that can do for foods. As always, reach out with questions. If you have questions about other substitutions, let me know. Covered a lot of them, but if you need anything else, just reach out. I'm here to help, and take care, stay well, and I'll catch you on Friday. Bye.
Bye, Chef, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.